Welcome to Bonding, a kinky podcast hosted by me, Sarah Butcher, aka Sub in the City. I'm a BDSM coach, kink educator, and proudly collared submissive, with over a decade of experience on the BDSM scene. I'm on a mission to bring BDSM into the 21st century and empower curious kinksters like yourselves to consciously explore what BDSM means to you. In this podcast, you'll hear me talk about all things kink. So whether you're new to the scene or you're a long-standing member of the community, welcome kinksters. I'm looking forward to bonding with you. Hello kinksters and welcome back to Bonding. Today's topic is all about BDSM, sex parties and monogamy. And these topics are all ones that deserve an episode in their own right, but what I wanted to touch on today is just some of the myths and misconceptions around BDSM, sex parties and monogamy, specifically around the common assumption that being kinky automatically means that you need to be cool with having multiple partners. Now, while I'm sure that a lot of kinky folk are poly and a lot of poly folk are kinky, it makes sense because both lifestyles are very much open-minded ones that are about exploring our desires in an authentic, connected and trusting way. But there does seem to be this assumption or false expectation that because you're into BDSM, you should also be cool with the idea of multiple partners. And while kink and polyamory is a different conversation for a different day, in the context of this discussion, this isn't necessarily about being polyamorous and having multiple relationships, but simply about being open to having multiple sexual connections in addition to your primary long-term partner. I think monogamous is what the kids are calling it these days. And I say this based on conversations that I've had with a lot of people over the years, and recently I was asked by someone, Sarah, no matter how kinky things are between the two of us, is it just inevitable that one day they will want to fuck someone else? And I mean, there is no definitive answer to this, because ultimately I don't think the desire to have multiple partners is directly linked to how kinky you are, nor do I think the desire to have multiple partners should be attributed to your kinkiness. Yet there seemed to be the assumed expectation, and it's not the first time I've heard it either. And it's not surprising to me because a lot of what we see in the media about BDSM and kink involves sex clubs and orgies, and while all of that can be a hell of a lot of fun if that's what you're into, it also isn't directly associated with BDSM and kink. In fact, you can go to a sex party and not engage in BDSM, and you can go to a sex party and not fuck multiple people, or have sex at all if you don't want to. Sex parties have got to be one of the most highly misunderstood and misrepresented concepts in the world, because unless you've actually been to a sex party, it's hard to fully comprehend the vibe. There are so many other facets to play parties besides the playing part. For many, play parties, sex parties, or fetish clubs are all about the atmosphere they provide. We're talking grand venues and decor, erotic performances that titillate the senses, decadent dinners and drinks, sensual music, otherworldly dress codes, and finally, dungeons and playrooms. They really do allow you to step into a whole other universe. And not just a universe where everyone is fucking each other, but one where you can express yourself fully and authentically without judgment, in as many ways as you want. The way that you dress, the way that you walk, the way that you talk. It's a world where the word sex isn't made to feel dirty, unless you want it to be. And people are having honest and raw conversations about their desires with people they just met. Play parties are also places where you can learn and play, watching the pro-doms work the dungeon, watching the performers' mesmerising moves. It's a playground for inspiration. You can simply experience that atmosphere and take that energy home with you if you want to. It doesn't mean you have to fuck other people, and no one will expect you to either. Because these places are built on the foundation of trust, mutual respect and consent, just like BDSM is. Everyone has their own limits, and they don't just go out the window the minute you step into a sex party. Your attendance does not indicate consent or even desire for that matter. And before I digress too much into the topic of play parties, because again, another topic for another day, my point is that if you've always wanted to immerse yourself in the decadent atmosphere of a kink party, but you don't have the desire to play with others, you are still so welcome in those spaces. Monogamy is not something to be ashamed of, nor does it give you any less right to be in a space like that. You can take from it what you want and leave what you don't. No one is going to tell you otherwise. So, when I was asked this question about the inevitability of opening up a relationship to other play partners, I felt as though there was also an expectation from this person that I would confirm that yes, they would have to accept that this was the inevitable future for the relationship if they wanted it to be successful. And it made me think of when I first started out in the world of kink, single and in the dating game, I felt this same expectation and assumption. Telling people I was kinky almost felt like I was telling them I'm not looking for anything serious, or that I was just obsessed with sex. Of course, now I'm aware that these people had no idea what BDSM was really all about, but I was young and new to the scene. I dated guys who wanted to have me as their sub whilst also having multiple other girlfriends. And while that is absolutely valid as a setup for many people, that wasn't what I was looking for at the time. Yet I was made to feel like I was simply being too closed-minded, or that I wasn't really kinky enough if I wasn't into that type of dynamic. I was also told that looking for someone who wants a long-term relationship and who would also want to live a kinky lifestyle as dom and sub didn't exist, and that I was trying to find a needle in a haystack. But how untrue all of this was. In hindsight, and from the relationship that I have built today with my fiancé and dom, I realised that these previous experiences were actually nothing to do with me being closed-minded and everything to do with their attitude and respect towards my needs and desires. Which is what building a BDSM lifestyle or dynamic is all about. Multiple partners and playing with others is simply another limit and boundary that needs to be discussed and respected. And if it feels like a hard limit, that's likely either because it doesn't feel safe in your current dynamic, or it simply isn't for you. And that is a-okay. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling like you've not truly experienced the world of BDSM because you're not a regular at Torture Garden and you don't invite your couple friends over for a wife swap, just know that that is valid. And if you do both of those things, that's valid too. There is something incredibly special about building a deep, committed connection with someone, whether you're kinky or not. Yet there is a lot of monogamy shaming that goes on. Whatever your relationship preference, that's cool. It's all valid. And ultimately, it's down to what feels right for you. So my response to the earlier question around the inevitability of opening up a relationship is 2 questions for you. 1, is that what you want? And 2, what does that look like for you? Because as with any discussion around desire, there are usually parameters, and what a desire looks like to one person can be different for another. So it could look like swinging, where otherwise monogamous romantic couples typically swap partners or play together. Or you might define it as previously mentioned monogamous, I'm still not sure on that word, where couples in romantic relationships have the sexual freedom to explore with others. Or perhaps together you would like to include others in your dynamic, but with certain rules around what that inclusion looks like. Or perhaps you want your partner all to yourself. Remember, these desires can also fluctuate and change over time. Perhaps it depends on how long you've been together as to how safe you feel to explore playing with others. Or perhaps there are boundaries around where you play. So if the public sex party environment isn't your bag, you can do it behind closed doors. Remember, you don't need to prove anything to anybody. While some people are very open about their kinks and like to engage in the kink community in public spaces, it's also perfectly okay to keep your BDSM dynamic to yourself. Because having your own kinky little secret between the two of you can also be super sexy. Again, all of this comes down to a perceived image of the BDSM lifestyle. And I guess the point of this discussion comes back to stereotypes, assumptions, and pressure that we might feel from the media, the wider community, or simply from ourselves, based on what we think we should be doing in order to say we're doing BDSM the right way. But there is no right way to BDSM. Remember to stick to what turns you on, because ultimately that's what really counts. If you're single and looking for monogamy, don't think that those in the community are expecting something different from you. And if you're in a monogamous relationship but feel you're missing out on the kinky underworld, this is your sign to book that ticket and go and experience it without the pressure or expectation of sex in the mix. And if you need some recommendations and guidance on dating when kinky and navigating the kink scene in general, then all of these top tips will be available to members of my brand new membership community on Patreon, which is now live. I'll pop the link in the show notes. Memberships start at as little as £5 per month, and anyone who signs up as a premium member between now and the 14th of February will get a free one-to-one coaching session with me for personalised guidance and kink education. Before I leave you, remember, whether you decide to engage in kink with one person or multiple people is entirely down to the type of experiences you're wanting to create. Being single and kinky, dating and kinky, cohabiting and kinky, married and kinky are all valid and enjoyable kink experiences. So have fun, whatever you choose. So much love to you all, and I will see you in the next pod. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. And if you want to continue to consciously explore your kinks, be sure to check out my upcoming workshops and events at subinthecity.com/events, or book your one-to-one BDSM exploratory session with me today at subinthecity.com/booking.